This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
Everybody, let's face it, you've waited the whole weekend for this, have you not? You have waited the entire weekend to find out who was going to get some plaudits, who was going to get a pat on the back, who was going to be a recipient of this week's edition of
The Other Side of Midnight presents Commendations.
Let me begin with the Massachusetts high school class president who wrote 180 personalized letters to his classmates as part of a final send-off. I think this is great. His name is Mason McCutch, and he's the senior class president, and he was near the end of his speech at his high school's graduation ceremony when he paused and asked his classmates to look under their seats. He said, "We've studied together, laughed together, and grown together, and tomorrow all of that changes. I want you to reach under your chairs where you'll find a personal note that I've written for each of you as a way to say one final goodbye." Then he added, "Thank you for making these years what we will soon call the good old days." As his classmates retrieved the thank you notes he'd taped under their seats on June 7th, many of them became emotional. He wrote a handwritten note to 180 students. This is extraordinary. This is an extraordinary young man. I try to keep up with, the handwritten notes and things like that. I am lucky if I can do 2 or 3 a week, and for people that are deserving of it. By the way, if you've done something for me and I haven't sent you a handwritten note, I apologize. Not a function of lack of gratitude. It's a function of lack of time. But those same demands of time, I'm sure Mason had to contend with as well. And he still found the time to go out of his way to write 180 handwritten notes. To me, this is just so special and so impressive because there's just something magical about a handwritten note, something very personal, something very special. And when you, and I've seen this, when I send people notes, they remember it, they save it. It's not something that they read and just move on like an email. It's really very special, and I give this young man a great deal of credit. I must also commend the Tennessee Tech students. Tennessee Tech is a college. The Tennessee Tech students who created a 3D printed prosthetic to help a 12-year-old drummer fulfill her dreams. The 12-year-old in question is Aubrey Salvey, who has danced competitively. She has a black belt in Taekwondo. She played drums in her middle school band. And she does all of that without hands. Like any 12-year-old, she loves the things that 12-year-olds like: makeup, art, dance, music. The only difference is she doesn't have hands. She was born as a triple congenital amputee, meaning that she does not have limbs below both her elbows, and a foot is missing toes. While her peers might have been completing tasks faster, Aubrey wasn't going to let anything stand in the way of doing the same task. So, and from a young age, she's just been very determined on this kind of thing. So these students at Tennessee Tech and their professor of mechanical engineering, Stephen Canfield, they found out what was going on here and how determined this young woman was. And after 3 to 4 weeks of planning, 10 students at Tennessee Tech decided to create a prosthetic using a 3D printer. And that's when this professor, Stephen Canfield, said those famous, infamous words. He said, that is a 1 in a million chance that will work, but let's give it a try. So the students spent an entire semester working with Aubrey to get measurements and preferences before returning to the lab for research and development. The students would wait for hours for each completed drafted version on the 3D printer. And finally, they got it right. And they created 3D printed prosthetics to help her fulfill her dreams of becoming a drummer. So I think that's just wonderful. I must also commend the Japanese man who grew a record-breaking 63-leaf clover. I mean, this is cool. Okay. Yoshiharu Watanabe earned a Guinness World Record by growing a 63-leaf clover. I mean, they say a 4-leaf clover is lucky. Can you imagine the luck that Mr. Watanabe has? A 63-leaf clover? Hello. Mr. Watanabe, I do commend you. And I must also commend Viagra. Yes, Viagra. No, it has nothing to do with the performance that it may help you with in the bedroom. No. Viagra is in the process of getting an image makeover thanks to 2 recent studies linking its use to a reduced risk of Alzheimer's and dementia in men. Let me tell you something. Probably much to my wife's chagrin, I'm going to try and get my hands on some of this Viagra now. Last thing I want is dementia. And now these 2 studies, which apparently are pretty reputable, show that it does help. It does help. Now, I mean, obviously, there's still a lot more research that needs to be done, but these studies found that men who had been prescribed drugs like Viagra or Cialis had an 18% lesser chance of developing Alzheimer's later on compared to men who hadn't been given the drug. The link was even stronger among men, among those who had been issued the most prescriptions, a whopping 44% lower. So it does look like the more Viagra you take, the less of a chance you have of getting Alzheimer's or dementia. Really incredible. Nice to see. Viagra, I do commend you. And I also want to commend the On family. The On family is a family of Taekwondo athletes. And when Simon On and his family heard screaming from a store next door to their family Taekwondo studio on Wednesday outside Houston, Texas, they knew they had to find out what was happening. Now, Simon On is 20 and his family, every single one of them, practices martial arts. And they immediately went next door and they found a man attempting to sexually assault a woman. And they intervened. They intercepted and held him down until police arrived. On told CNN on Friday the family was returning from their lunch break and were parking at the Taekwondo studio when his father heard a loud scream as he exited his car. Then the whole family heard a second scream, and it was loud, very loud. They said that it was described as a horror scream. His father led the family into a nearby Cricket wireless store, and he heard another scream as he opened the door and rushed to the employee's room in the back, where he found a man on top of the woman with his hand over her mouth. And they saved the girl, called police. And there's one young man, Alex Robinson, who's now been charged with attempted sexual assault in connection with this case. But, I mean, if there's somebody you don't want to try anything around, should be people at a Taekwondo studio. Better pick your targets better in the future, pal. I must commend fishermen, or the fishermen in Mississippi, that pulled off a dramatic rescue of 38 dogs treading water. Yes, that's right. Fishermen in Mississippi rescued 38 dogs. What started off as a day on the water with a friend turned into a full-on rescue mission. Bob Gist, a State Farm agent in Arkansas, decided to go on a fishing trip with his friend Brad Carlisle, a State Farm agent in Tennessee, after they, hadn't seen one another in a while. The two men headed to Grenada Lake in Mississippi, and they got in touch with a local fishing guide who led them out onto the water. And after fishing in the early morning hours and not having much luck, the group moved to a different location. They go about a half mile or so from where they were to another place, and they start fishing. And pretty soon, they heard dogs barking. Pretty soon, they saw dogs on the horizon in the water. The dogs were part of an annual fox run that takes place in the area. And a total of 38 dogs were rescued from Grenada Lake in Mississippi after the fishermen, heard them barking. So this is great. These dogs were very lucky. The men took all the dogs onto the boat so they wouldn't drown, and they started calling the dogs onto the boat. They would grab their collar, put them in the boat. They grabbed as many dogs as they could and fit them on the boat before running out of room. And then one of them managed to gather 25 to 27 dogs, making sure none of the pups attempted to jump back in the water. Now, that's difficult in and of itself. Once the men returned the dogs to the riverbank, they found that the owners were in a panic and calling out for help. After rescuing the second group of dogs, one man on land told Gist and the others that he had the GPS tracker for the dogs and asked if he could join the rescue. And sure enough, that tracker led the other men to an additional group of 3 to 4 dogs who were estimated to be further than a mile from the bank. They were on the verge of drowning because they'd been treading water for an hour. I mean, this is terrible. The owner of the dogs tried to pay these fishermen, but they refused to take the reward. I mean, this is great. These are true heroes of dog rescue. I want to commend George Strait. Love George Strait, a magnificent artist, if ever there was one. George Strait broke an attendance record with the largest ever concert held in the United States. George Strait, the country legend, performed before 110,905 ticket-buying fans on June 15th at Kyle Field at Texas A&M in College Station. Really impressive. I want to commend the Boston Celtics. They won the NBA championship and got their record 18th championship. They celebrated along with a nice parade. I want to commend NVIDIA. NVIDIA for 2 whole days was the world's most valuable company. They've cratered back down a little bit, but sure enough, for about 2 days, they were ahead of Apple. They were ahead of Microsoft. They were the most valuable company in the world. They no longer are, but better to have been the most valuable company in the world than never to have been the most valuable company in the world, right? I mean, if you're the CEO of NVIDIA, you go to a cocktail party. Hey, what do you do? Well, I'm an insurance salesman. What do you do? Oh, I'm a mailman. What do you do? I'm an accountant. Oh, what do you do? I'm on the radio. What do you do? Well, I'm a CEO of a company that last week was the most valuable company on the planet. Now, that's an impressive thing. And finally, I want to commend my brother, Dr. Nicholas Morano, and my sister-in-law, Kat, for willingly volunteering to babysit our son, Carmine, on Friday. They made the trip all the way out to our hometown. They live in a different borough and came out and spent the evening with Carmine while his mother and I got to go out to dinner and for a drink. And I know Rachel has been quite stressed as of late. And I think it's been a while since we had a night out, just the two of us. So that was really nice of my brother Nick and sister-in-law Kat. So thank you. And Nick is always trying for a commendation. I think the last one they got was around the time they were married. So congratulations to you, Nick, on getting that commendation, and my sincere gratitude to both Nick and Kat. He certainly had a good time with both of you. All right. If if you have a comment on anyone that I have commended, be my guest, 800-848-9222. That's 800-848-9222. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is Greg Kelly for Priority Gold. What does it mean to be America's precious metals dealer? It means that you're in touch with the hearts and minds of those who love this country, value our freedom, and want to protect the future. Priority Gold is that precious metals dealer. They've helped thousands of Americans back their retirement with solid gold and silver. Call Priority Gold at 888-506-6439. Receive free shipping, free storage, a free investment guide, and one of the best purchase experiences in the industry. Call now or go to PriorityGold.com.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Like it came from Japan, and out of the door walked the spaceman. If you think it's back and lies, I saw it happen with my own eyes. A million miles from the Milky Way, 100 years, a month and a day. 0, 0, UFO. UFO.
The Ramones, 00 UFO. It was on this day in 1947 that the modern UFO spotting movement was born, and where we first got that term flying saucer. So it's also interesting. You know what else happened 25 years ago last week? It was the debut of one of the most impressive and significant television programs of all time. That's right. Last week, it was 25 years since The Sopranos debuted. And you want to talk about a show that has had an enduring and remarkable impact on popular culture, you have to talk about The Sopranos. I mean, it's great. It still holds up really well today. But the thing that I don't know that younger people will appreciate if they're watching The Sopranos now for the first time, which apparently a lot of them are. Even the New York Times Magazine did a whole article about all these young people that are watching The Sopranos now. Young people are flocking to this show with the same sort of enthusiasm that we watched it when it was actually on. You remember what a big deal it was when it was on? You knew not to bother anyone Sunday night at 9 p.m. You'd look outside, nothing was going on Sunday night at 9 p.m. because especially in the third, fourth, fifth season, everyone was home watching The Sopranos, or they'd be at a friend's. I mean, that became a thing, especially as the show developed in popularity, is you'd have these kind of mini Sopranos parties. I remember in our house, you'd have my neighbor Brian Silverstein over. I'd have my Uncle Steve. You'd have my mom, or her boyfriend at the time. Everyone would gather to watch The Sopranos. And what I was going to say is my brother-in-law, Jared, watched the show recently. And I got the impression, I think he even said this, that he wasn't that impressed with it. And I was shocked. This is maybe the greatest drama of all time. How can that be? And he said, and I thought this was a very astute observation on his part. He said, one of the things that has changed with television is how unusual it was to say, kill off a regular character. Now, every show does that kind of thing. He's right about that. When The Sopranos did it, it was rare. It was just not rare. It was unheard of. I mean, you only killed off a regular character when they had a contract dispute or when they were leaving the show. You didn't do it as a plot point. Now, every drama since The Sopranos, they're almost programmed to try to throw something at you that you're not expecting each and every week. First of all, that even just assumes weekly viewing of shows. A lot of shows, they just drop and you're able to watch them whenever you want to watch them. But David Preval, who was incredible on that show, he played Richie Aprile, who was very much the villain of season 2. He talked about James Gandolfini, who unfortunately is no longer with us, and why people liked Tony as a character. And I thought this was an interesting observation from Preval.
David, Tony was a ruthless killer, and yet America loved him. Why do you think that was?
They're ruthless killers. They loved him because Jim had some magic in him, but you saw this damaged heart or something in that character.
Jamie Lynn Sigler, she played Meadow, obviously. She talked about auditioning for a show called The Sopranos. Now, prior to that show, what would you think about when you'd think of The Sopranos? You'd think of musicians, right? Well, it was no different for her.
All the information I was given was a 16-year-old Italian-looking girl for a show called Sopranos. I come from a musical theater background, so I was stoked thinking it was going to be singing for television. Yeah. So I think I remember kind of looking around, noticing there's no accompanist or so should I sing a cappella? And I remember David telling me that was not necessary.
Steve Sciarippa, who along with Michael Imperioli, they do a terrific podcast where they review each episode and talk about the show and do interviews called Talking Sopranos. Steve Sciarippa, who plays Bobby Bacala, talked about the recent passing of Tony Sirico.
He was a very loyal guy. Tony and Paulie are one, and they broke the mold when they made Tony Sirico. He was a wonderful guy.
Jamie Lynn Sigler and Steve Sciarippa talk about the passing of James Gandolfini.
I felt protected by him and loved by him, and he really was one of a kind, and I feel very lucky to have been guided by him for as long as I was.
As great an actor as he was an even better guy.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody says about James Gandolfini, but very sad that he was gone so young. I hear they're doing a Sopranos spinoff. I always wonder about stuff like this. I mean, it's so difficult to recapture the magic of something that's special. You know, it can be done, but what's much more common is that you're not able to. Right. It's that you just it seems forced, for a show to be or not even just a show, any work of popular culture, a television program, a motion picture, a radio show. You really need the right mix of things to work. It's sometimes something that can't be replicated in a laboratory. And so I always wonder when you try to recapture that lightning in a bottle, sometimes they even try to bring back the same show and it doesn't work. Recent examples that come to mind were Will and Grace. Now, I never saw Will and Grace, either the original or the continuation, and Murphy Brown. I did watch the original Murphy Brown, but I didn't see the new one. I don't think it had the same staying power. Well, I know it didn't because it was canceled. It did not have that same magic as the original Murphy Brown. So I always wonder about the attempts to recapture that lightning in a bottle. You can't blame them for trying, right? Because they're trying to make money. They don't call it's show business. They don't call it show fun. They're trying to make money, right? And something that is as popular as The Sopranos, or like we were talking about, I think on Thursday, Spaceballs. People are going to try and squeeze every drop out of that. And sometimes it works well. The best example I can think of is the Rocky franchise. Sometimes it doesn't work so well. So many more examples than that I can list. So 25 years. I remember being hooked from the first frame of the first minute of the first episode. And I know everyone says that now, but I remember a lot of people didn't discover that show until the second season, where the reruns between the first and second season. And it's still a great show. I showed it to my wife about 3 years ago. She had never seen the show. We watched the whole thing. And it was my first time watching the show since it had aired. And first of all, it's amazing. I thought I remembered it. There's so many details and interesting things that you catch rewatching it now. And you see all these moments that you don't even take notice of at the time that are now huge. For instance, there's this one episode where one of the extras in the episode, who I don't even think she has a line, is Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga is and you see her plain as day. She's there, joking around with AJ and his friends as they're trashing their school. She's there. You see another episode where a porter at a hotel is a totally unknown guy named Lin-Manuel Miranda. It's just all these things that you see 25 years looking back that you wouldn't have seen before. So happy anniversary to The Sopranos. We've had several of the cast members from that show on the program, and they always have such great stories about the show. By the way, if you want to get some Moranos merchandise, whether it's a hat, a shirt, or anything, kind of made to look like The Sopranos, you can go to the Other Side of Midnight online store and order some. Just go to store.othersideofmidnightshow.com. That's store.othersideofmidnightshow.com. And if you use the promo code FRANK15, you can actually save 15% off, which is a nice thing. But it's a cool thing. It's all sorts of Moranos merchandise that's meant to be a send up of the Sopranos. All right, 800-848-9222. Let me say hello to Larry in Brooklyn. Hi, Larry.
Yeah, hi, Frank. I'd like to comment about that Michigan State representative. It strikes me as overly moralistic to cast negative aspersions on, to comment on a salacious headline about something that's not even detailed. First of all, you said he was chasing the stripper with a gun. Maybe his jacket was off and the gun was in the holster and it was just exposed. We don't know the details. And, people have a sexual side to them, even politicians. I mean, what's wrong with going to a bar and seeing a stripper? Is there anything inherently wrong with that?
No, there's not. I mean, I don't know if I was in a tight re-election, if that's the kind of thing that I would be doing. But no, there's nothing wrong with that. It's once you are carrying a weapon and chasing a stripper, that it develops a whole new level. And then to put out a statement where you're framing that as some sort of defense of the Second Amendment, that I think is a little odd.
Well, it didn't say he had the gun drawn, did it?
No, that's true. So the story that I read, it did not say that he had his gun drawn.
And maybe she welched out on a lap dance or something like that, and he was righteously indignant about it.
Yeah, I mean, if she was going to welch out on a lap dance, I mean, would you give chase though, Larry?
Well, it's a small episode of when somebody is righteously indignant, they don't think of the larger picture, because what's he doing there to begin with? In fact, that gives me a recall to Elliot Spitzer. I personally think it's outrageous that Elliot Spitzer had to go down into infamy when somebody like Cuomo, he wasn't caught with a stripper. He just allegedly got his jollies from from hugging hello. He says, "I hug hello," and everybody goes, "Oh, that's so cool and everything." But Elliot Spitzer is caught doing what men do all the time. He wasn't married. Okay, so the way,
Elliot Spitzer was married
at the time that he did that. Oh, yeah, but he was separated or something like that.
I mean, he was married to Silda. Remember, she came out and did the press conference with him, standing by his side. Now they're divorced, but at the time they were married. But again,
but you know what? They rewarded the hooker with a column in Sunday Newsday.
Oh, she's a star. No, it was actually the New York Post at first.
The New York Post, right?
Yeah, Ashley Dupree. Oh, she's a star. Her song became a big hit. She was very wealthy. Absolutely. No, look, I'm not a big moralist, Larry. It's the way that they're framing this as, oh, the deep state is out to get us. No, the deep state didn't force you to chase after a stripper with a gun. I mean, just say we made a mistake, or don't say anything. Make no comment. We're confident and we're going to let the investigation play out and speak for itself. But to frame this as, oh, the system is rigged and they're coming after him, it's ridiculous, honestly, Larry. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I might agree with that aspect of it. That's true.
Yeah. Hey, Larry, thanks for the call. And by the way, I agree with Larry. The difference in what Andrew Cuomo went down for versus Elliot Spitzer, very significant. And you know what, Andrew, I'm going to chat about this a little later, probably. Andrew Cuomo, I'm not a fan of Andrew Cuomo, but he really did get railroaded for what they supposedly went down for. I would love to see him go down for a lot of other things, but what he went down for, really terrible. However, there is an element of karma there because, he was pivotal, Cuomo, when he was Attorney General in the fall of both David Patterson and Elliot Spitzer, two people who he perceived as being in his way. No doubt about it. Pivotal. We'll get into that. All right. 800-848-9222 if you want to comment on anything I'm talking about. 800-848-9222, the 25th anniversary of The Sopranos, or anything else that we've focused on. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Gonna take you down, deep down to the front line. You woke up this morning, got yourself a gun. Your mama always said you'd be the chosen one. She said one in a million, you got to burn the shine. You were born under a bad sign with a blue moon in your eye. And you woke up this morning, all that love had gone. Your papa never told you about right and wrong. But you're looking good, baby. I believe that you're feeling fine. Shake my body, born under a bad sign with a blue moon in your eyes. So sing it now. Woke up this morning, got a blue moon, got a blue moon in your eyes. So sad, goddamn.
17 minutes until the top of the hour. This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. This obviously is Woke Up This Morning from Alabama 3, but it's a song that became better known as the theme song for The Sopranos. Hey, I have to mention this, and this is, it might be a little tough for some people to hear, but come on. We're all adults, right? And those of us that are not adults, you can get a, lascivious thrill from me saying a word that some folks may think is tawdry. But it's a true story. Scientists have found microplastics in human penises for the first time, as concerns over the tiny particles' proliferation and potential health effects mount. 7 different kinds of microplastics were found in 4 out of 5 samples of penis tissue taken from 5 different men as part of a study published in a medical journal, IJIR. Microplastics, if you're not familiar with this, I've tried to talk about this a lot because I think this is actually a real problem. Microplastics are polymer fragments that can range from less than 0.2 inches down to 1/25,000th of an inch, 1 micrometer. Anything smaller is a nanoplastic that must be measured in billionths of a meter. They form when larger plastics break down, either by chemically degrading or physically wearing down into smaller pieces. Some minuscule particles can invade individual cells and tissues in major organs, and evidence is mounting that they are increasingly present in our bodies. Ranjith Ramasamy, who is an expert in reproductive urology, who conducted the research while working at the University of Miami, told CNN that he used a previous study that found evidence of microplastics in the human heart as a basis for his research. You know, I love doing these stories, and we do them pretty often, about stuff that's discovered thousands of years later. Bodies, artifacts, wine, secret cities, whatever. It's kind of cool to look back at history and discover these different things. Do you know how people, if any bodies from this era are discovered 1,000 years from now, do you know how they're going to know they're from this era? The microplastics. If they find microplastics in your body, they're going to say, oh, okay, that person was from the early part of the 21st century. I mean, we are living in plastic. They're all over. We're exposed like crazy. I can't imagine this is good for us. We've seen a decline in worldwide fertility. Could it be that there's some sort of correlation with the microplastics? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll see. The guy, you want to become a billionaire? You become the guy that figures out a way to get microplastics out of your body and say, all you have to do is take this pill. The microplastics melt away. That's the next $1 billion idea because people are concerned about this stuff. Rightly so, in my view. 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. Eric is in Manhattan. Hi, Eric.
Hey, Frank. Sorry, that was on my end. I got disconnected. About your previous caller, Elliot Spitzer was frequenting, prostitutes while prosecuting people in sex trade and their customers. So there's a lot of hypocrisy that's a little bit more involved than just a guy going with a hooker, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
look, I mean, first of all, again, this is 17 years ago. I don't necessarily want to relitigate the whole Spitzer case, but yeah, whenever you're the governor or in any position of the public trust, when you're secretly committing crimes, which prostitution was and is, you're also putting yourself in a position where you can be blackmailed, right? And that's not necessarily the kind of thing that we'd want from a governor. And look, I say this as somebody that to this day is a friend of the Manhattan Madam, who who was one of the escort services that, that Elliot Spitzer patronized. So I don't think consensual adults engaging in this sort of thing is the biggest deal in the world. But yeah, there's definitely a problem with hypocrisy, and as I alluded to, potentially being blackmailed. No doubt about it.
Yeah, you're compromised there. Yeah, it's bad.
Indeed.
The other thing was about them. As I told you, call screener, you said Thursday night that you'd never spoken to Donald Sutherland before, and you had. This was sometime last year, and I'm sure I recorded it. I'm going to look for it. He called. He was a caller immediately before me, and then when I got on, I said, was that Donald Sutherland? And you thought it was. If it was not Donald Sutherland, I'll eat a jelly bean, I swear.
Really?
But I'm going to try to look for you.
Well,
it was him. Well, it had to be him, but it was unrelated to the acting fee or anything. He called in about, somehow it got to the subject of giving up lobster. He was saying it was just the expense of it and the nonsense, and I don't know, that type of thing, and everything involved with the lobster stuff. But don't quote me on that. I'm going to find a recording. So
all right. Well, yeah. Let us know. Let us know. We're gonna
sure, definitely.
And you know what? Now that Donald Sutherland is dead, Eric, even if that wasn't Donald Sutherland, let's just say it was. Right? I mean,
there you go. I like that. I like that outlook. That's great.
Yeah, I'm serious. Thank you. My friend Joe Franklin, as great as he was, Joe, amazing man, amazing entertainer, amazing human being, a great friend and a great mentor. But Joe, whenever any celebrity died, Joe became their best friend. I mean, without fail. I mean, he would always tell almost the exact same story. He would always say something to the effect of, after so-and-so died, his daughter came over to me and she said he would watch you on television every night. He always wanted to come on. He was always ashamed to ask. And I remember he said that after Charlie Chaplin died. He actually said that about after Charlie Chaplin died. I got to talk to his daughter after he died, and he would watch us on television every night. He always wanted to come on, and just his daughter said never wanted to ask. And I'm thinking, Charlie Chaplin lived in Switzerland for the last 25, 30 years of his life. Somehow he had a satellite hookup to Channel 9 in New York and was able to watch the Joe Franklin show. But I went along with it. I'll never forget. But he was so convincing that I think he convinced himself. And I'll never forget the last time I saw Joe was in his hospital bed. It was literally his deathbed. And it was in January of 2015. I saw him a few days before he died. And it was, it happened to be Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It was 6 days before he died. It was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and I was with Joe in the hospital, and Joe was barely coherent, could barely speak. He had a needle stuck into his neck because they couldn't find a proper vein in his arms. A needle stuck into his neck to give him painkillers because he was in such bad shape and could barely speak, and was happy to see me. And I played him some of our old interviews. That was when I still had a working hard drive and had access to my archives. But I said to him, Joe, because I'm trying to make conversation and make light of the fact that, he's sitting there in pain and having a tough time. I said, Joe, today's Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Did you ever know Martin Luther King Jr.? Did you ever interview him? Did you ever get to meet him? And he said, look, stammering through pain, he says, absolutely. We were very good friends. And which I have my doubts about. But I said, oh, was he a nice man, or was he not as nice in person? Very nice man. We were very good friends. That's the thing with Joe. And you know what? That's how it'll be with me and Donald Sutherland. That guy, Eric, says that Donald Sutherland called in to talk about lobster. Why shouldn't he have? I'm saying he did. If you're listening to this program right now, I suggest you go along with that as well. right? Why not? All right. 800-848-9222 if you want to comment. 800-848-9222. By the way, I mentioned how my wife lost her copy of the car keys. This is my fault in her view, so I've agreed to pay for these. Fine, great. So, have you ever tried to replace a key fob? I have. I've lost keys before and key fobs before. The last time I lost one, I think it was about $150 to replace. My wife spent a good portion of Friday calling around to see how much it would be to replace our key fob. So first she calls the dealership. How much, Matt Blaze, you have any idea how much it would be to replace this key fob with the dealership?
$500.
$600. $600. So then she calls a few other places, and these are all the shadiest fly-by-night operations in the world. She calls around. Some you can leave a message. Others you can email. And she calls 4 or 5 different places. One person sends her a text message back. Hey, did you want a key fob? It's this amount of money. It was a little less. I think that this person was about $500. And this person that texted her never identified themselves, either with a name or a company. Just say, hey, you're looking for a key fob? And she says, who is this? Is this XYZ Keys? And they said, no. They don't say who it is. So she says, okay, I'm not going with whoever that is. Then another company calls her, ready? And says, okay, so you need a key fob. Yes. What kind of car do you have? Do you have this? Blah, 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 blah. All right. Well, I'm going to have one of our engineers call you. Okay. So the engineer calls her and says, all right, it's going to be about $450 if you want to replace it. Now, that's not as bad as $600. Okay. Well, I'll certainly think about it, and I'm waiting to hear from a couple other people. Thank you. A woman from that same company calls. Did our engineer call you? Yes. What did he tell you? And Rachel's thinking, why are you asking me? Shouldn't you guys have spoken? But she says, all right, well, it's about, she said it would be $450. Okay, well, does that fit within your budget? That's what the person says. Well, I mean, obviously, she says I'd much prefer to pay $400 than $450, but it was just such an odd thing that you get the sense that these two people that work in the same company, that they're not communicating with one another except through Rachel. And, so that's that. We're working on that today. I got my friend Mike Porcelli, who's the most knowledgeable mechanic or car person in the world. I've got him on the case as well. So I'm going to go with whatever he recommends, because he knows everything there is to know about cars. So we'll see where that goes. But it is a frustrating thing. These key fobs got to be programmed and this and that, and it's just a terrible thing. But who knows? You know what? And if I ever lose my keys, because I've lost my keys before, I've learned this lesson the hard way. It says, if found, please call. And it's got my phone number on there. And I said, honey, do you have one of those on your key ring? No, because I don't lose my keys, she says. I said, well, looks like these keys are lost. And she said, yes, but I'm not the one that lost them. So there you have it. I think it's a good lesson for everybody, is always have one of those things on your keys that said, if keys are found, call, and then your phone number. I think that's a good thing. You don't have to put your name on there. Don't put your address. But there's a lot of those people that if they stumble upon your keys, will call that number and try to return them. Right? I mean, I think that's a nice thing. Or it's certainly, what do you have to lose? Right? What do you have to lose? Hey, by the way, we have spent a lot of time on this Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse and the boat crash. Well, some 12 weeks after the crash into the bridge in Baltimore, and big shout out to all of our listeners in Baltimore listening on WCBM. Most of the crew will now be able to leave. Did you know that? Did you know that 12 weeks later, this crew was still stuck here or stuck there? Now they're going to be able to go. They're going to be called to cooperate with law enforcement or to talk to law enforcement one at a time, but at least they're able to go. Good for them, right? All right. Your influence counts. Be sure to use it.